Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of the Biodiversity podcast by Teasels. And today I am joined, and I'm really pleased to introduce him, Daniel Holm from Highlands Rewilding. Hi, Daniel.
Morning, all.
How you doing?
Not too bad, yourself?
Yeah, not too bad at all. So I've been aware of quite a while now, actually, through the wonders of social media, like everybody finds out new information these days about what you guys have been doing up in the Highlands with Highlands Rewilding. So Daniel, do you just want to give a brief introduction to yourself and your role at Highlands Rewilding?
Yeah, no problem. So I'm one of the ranger team at the Bun Lloyd Estate, one of the two estates under Highlands Rewilding. My role's very varied. I do all sorts of, ranging from estate maintenance to survey work, to guided tours. It changes from day to day. It's very varied. Quite an interesting job, and I guess maybe slightly different from what a traditional ranger role would be, because of the mission of Highlands Rewilding and how we're trying to run the estate. Instead of just being sort of visitor liaison and
But isn't it, dare I say, if I can interject, isn't that the modern day, if I perhaps compare what you guys are doing to what the guys at NEP are doing and what the guys down at Wild Ken Hill are doing, correct me if I'm wrong, the day of wearing one hat on an estate may be over? Or...
I think so, yes. Yeah, and that's a big part of what we're trying to do is like show that like the estate can, there's so many different things that can be done on a large piece of land like that, rather than, say, for example, just grouse shooting on a huge area. That there's like so many other opportunities for an income from the land.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. So for the one viewer that's lived under a rock for the last 20 years, could you give how would you define rewilding? Perhaps how would you define rewilding on the Bun Lloyd estate? That'd be quite interesting to hear.
It's difficult. I mean, we're trying to rewilding.
Sorry if that's a sort of a difficult question, but I do feel that rewilding now is an overused word, and people use it just willy-nilly now. So it'd be interesting to see, sort of your take on that word, because you are on the ground dealing with, the processes.
I think, well, it certainly is. It's become a buzzword now, and our sort of view on it is like is to decide whether like intervention isn't always necessary. Sometimes it is. And so, like, I'll give you an example. Like, tree planting has become very popular these days, and tree planting has become part of like the rewilding buzzword, and just like plant trees everywhere. But obviously you need to be planting them in appropriate places, the appropriate species, looking at what's there already. If there's like remnant forest, like what species are there, and maybe using seed sources from those trees that you have on your land to maintain the genetic.
Yeah. Well, can we so that's really, really interesting, because you're bringing something to the conversation that I think gets lost, because you think you said about appropriate species. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, that I see, we have to, we've got government guidelines and government targets to meet for X, Y, and Z number of trees that we need to plant. But I think what gets lost is perhaps to do that, or definitely to do that, there are a lot of imports grown in different countries being imported to achieve that. And I think that kind of gets lost. So using, local provenance doesn't get much of a, well, doesn't get, perhaps there's a lot of conversation about it, but doesn't get listened to in a lot of cases.
No, I don't think so. And we're not really, I don't think we're really set up here to produce the amount of trees that the government say we need to plant.
Yeah.
We're really not, we don't have the infrastructure for it. And importing trees has caused so many problems, and with the importation of diseases and such. Like I previously worked as a tree planter for quite a few years, and we were planting ash, and then the ash dieback came back, and we had to go back to a lot of sites and pull all the ash out in case it was contaminated. So yeah, definitely promoting local tree nurseries would be a great thing to do. Again, although I mean, there's also this argument for not planting at all. If you have already on your land, there's a lot of trees around, and they act as a seed source. Just let that sort of happen. Let the trees seed themselves and natural succession. It's just whether we're patient enough to allow that to happen. We're often in a rush to get it all done and changed very quickly. For example, we have a lot on Bunloit. We have lots of gorse, and sort of there was a lot of conversation about maybe getting rid of the gorse because there's lots of it and it's encroaching on grassland. But actually, the gorse acts as a really good tree nursery. It protects like young trees, and eventually they'll get up and they'll shade out the gorse and it'll turn into woodland. But it just takes longer than like we're not patient enough sometimes.
So it's quite interesting. You say we're not patient enough. I assume when you say we, is that in terms of sort of stakeholders or government?
No, I mean that's just in general, like not to do with like Bunloit. We're quite happy to look at what we've got, and for example, Bunloit is there's a lot of habitat that's quite intact there, and we have quite a good seed source of trees. So there's a good chance that we will leave quite a lot of the areas to do rewilding themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas the other estate we have down near Keith in Aberdeenshire there's very, very little native woodland left there, and so some tree planting might be required there.
Yeah, interesting. So but I draw the comparison between you mentioned about the gorse. I draw the comparison between you guys and Nep, how sort of the brambles became so the brambles, then the hawthorn became the sort of the nursery crop to then allow for the larger, slower growing sort of oak and beech to come through. So it's because it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting. So you were mentioning, like how how scrub can be overlooked. It's not a habitat type that perhaps we value as much as we should. Or do you find that on the estate?
Definitely, like scrub is really definitely overlooked. It's, I guess, because it doesn't produce anything valuable for us, so and it just it's stabby and all that. It gets in the way of productive farming or whatever. So, but it's very valuable habitat. Like a lot of birds use it for nesting. A lot of the scrub species produce berries or flowers for insects. And certainly, like we find on Bunloit, we have wild boar.
Yeah.
They quite like the gorse. Like they spend a lot of time sort of sheltering in the gorse because it's evergreen. It's good for them in the winter as well. And I think probably a lot of other mammal species as well. So scrub is definitely maligned. It's
yeah. No, perhaps I should get do a podcast especially about scrub, because like I say, much maligned, but again, like we've seen down in Nep, how it is really valued. But you mentioned about the wild boars, and what springs to mind is as soon as you said wild boars, the phrase landscape engineers came into my head, because again it's trying to draw the comparison with other rewilding sites. that how important you know, the wild boars are. Do you want to tell us what kind of effect they have or they are having on yeah, on the succession, on the rewilding aspect of Bun Lloyd? And they're not on Beldorney, are they, at the moment?
Oh no, we just have them at Bun Lloyd.
Yeah.
Well, they've been there approximately 20 years. Sort of, I think, from various escapes. Like there's definitely, like, some were escaped from wild boar farms, but there's also some sort of feral pigs in there as well, because some of them are spotted. They're not all your typical wild boar coloration.
Okay.
Most of them are. But certainly they're very industrious. We have some, on the grass, like they seem to be, from what I've seen of them in the last year, they like seasonally they use different habitats. We have quite a big area of oak woods.
Yeah.
They'll be in there in the autumn when the acorns are falling. Over the winter, they seem to have spent a lot of time in the grasslands. I'm not sure, but well, they were probably looking. We had cows, Highland cows there for a while, and they were looking under the Highland cow dung for dung beetle larvae, I guess.
Yeah.
So they come along, they dig, and so obviously they would turn the dung into the ground as well as digging it up and then opening it. And then come the spring now, there's a lot of these disturbed patches all across the grasslands, and sort of migratory birds. There's a lot of and native birds which stay here all year round love these exposed areas, and they're constantly, you see them all the time feeding in these areas. And then they would be dropping seeds there, or you know, and there's some other areas where the water's gathered in these disturbed areas. There's frog spawn, so they're really creating lots of habitats all over the estate, and allowing, maybe in the grasslands, which would otherwise be difficult for some seeds to get a foothold in, they're allowing those sort of bare patches and increasing the diversity of the grasslands. I think, I mean, it's difficult to say. It's only been a year I've been there, but I can certainly see how that's going to turn out. Like, it's,
yeah. The one thing that springs to mind is so what I'll do when I upload this podcast, I'll put the details, the links to the obviously to the website, but the natural capital report that was done back in 2020. The one thing that came out of that report for me was quite, you know, really conclusive report, really well done. But, you know, the quality of or the quality and the potential of the grasslands, because again, the natural capital report was saying that there was presence of certain fungus that would have been there because it's been undisturbed grassland. So
yes, it's unimproved grassland, so it's of sort of national importance.
Yeah,
there's not many of them around anymore. So we wouldn't. I think we would look to sort of maintain certainly some of that still. We wouldn't want it all to revert to woodland, which it might happen if we were just kind of leave it to itself.
Yeah.
So like the Highland cattle aren't there just now, but they'll be coming back in late summer.
Yeah.
And then we're also maybe thinking about getting some ponies as well to sort of make that sort of mix of large herbivores, and that will probably, it'll keep the succession to, it'll slow it down, and it'll end up being sort of more patchy rather than covering the whole area. Yeah, we want to maintain the grasslands, I think, definitely, as they are.
So prior to the estate being purchased by Jeremy back in 2020, what was happening on that what was happening on that grassland?
Sheep.
Okay.
Just sheep, and it was quite bad. It was really overgrazed with the sheep. So I think even in this year, there's been sort of a noticeable difference of like sort of species that have been allowed to come through because there's no sheep there.
Yeah. So I'm interested. So in the adjacent estates, you know, and a lot of the states in the Highlands, are there, so perhaps that's a broad term, but do you find it's a lot of it is down to, a lot of it's been put down to sheep, and has been and if left, you know, if there was a change in management, that it could revert to decent grassland, or a decent unimproved grassland, or is it has, or
I would say so. I think it depends on how. I mean, sheep can be okay if they're. I think, I don't know. It's a bit controversial. Like sort of hill farming and that. Like the sheep are just sort of left to. They just like on you go, and they just eat whatever they want. You know. Yeah. Whereas if you had them in by the farm, you can sort of manage. Right, they go there for that long. They go there for that long, and you can manage like how long they're grazing an area for, like, and sort of maybe grazing sort of pulses, and it allows the flora to recover, instead of just being grazed right down to like a golf course.
Are we talking about the subject of mob grazing? So perhaps you're
yes. Yeah. I mean, that's we've just recently employed Grampian graziers. I don't know if you've read about them. They're sort of, they won prizes for their mob grazing and sort of grazing techniques, and they're based down in Beldorney, but they'll be advising on our grazing going forward at Bun Lloyd.
Excellent. Yeah, and it comes full circle, isn't it? Like the, you know, integrating livestock into a landscape. You know, I think again, it's, you know, the broad term, you know, people always look at it, you know, cattle's the problem and the methane and all this type of you know, a very, you know, very focused conversation. But again, like you do, like, well, then like with the wild boars, like with the cattle, like with the mob grazing, including livestock into a rewilding system. I think there's so much data on that now. I don't think it can sort of, I think it's going to go on and on and on, isn't it? You know, where we integrate cattle into the landscape, integrate, you know, livestock into the landscape even more.
Definitely. I mean, it's the way it used to be. There used to be large herbivores everywhere. It's just like nowadays with modern farming, we do it in too much of an intensive way. It's just too focused, like thousands of cattle in a very small area. Whereas, yeah, if you do it on a small scale and sort of reasonable numbers, then it shouldn't really have an impact, because it's how.
Just going back to the old ways, really, aren't we?
No, going back to the old ways, but not just going back to like the megafauna that used to be here, that used to like roam the whole entire country. That's and everything was perfectly in balance then when there was all these large herbivores. So although, I mean, maybe the thousands of deer we have compensate for that. I don't know. Like there's.
So let's not go back back to when megafauna were traversing the earth. If we can go back a couple of years to when, just to give a bit of context and a bit of background for, again, the two people that, you know, don't know about Bun Lloyd and the great work you've started there already. Do you want to give us a bit of you know, history from when the estate was purchased to where we are now? Because I know that, you know, Jeremy's done he's quite an inspirational guy, isn't he? And he's really pushed it forward with him in the team.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't really speak too much about the first year, because I wasn't there in the first year. I came on board in the second year. So the first year was kind of like, I think, sort of basically they were sort of scoping out what would need to be done in order to quantify what we had on the estate. And then the second year was actually doing that. So we did a lot of baseline surveys of like
everything.
Everything. Well, not every. We couldn't get everything done because just didn't have time. But we'll be doing more of them this year. The ones we missed out on, like we're about to start our breeding bird survey next week. So yeah, so we've sort of gotten a good picture of what we have there already, covering all the different habitats and different groups of animals and plants. And then going forward, we will continually monitor that, and hopefully that will advise our management strategy and how we want to see an improvement in carbon sequestration and species diversity. And yeah, so we'll continually monitor that to see that that's what's happening. Going forward. See, I don't know. Is that sort of covered? As I don't really the history of what's happened.
That I mean, that's fine though. But what it brings up is that you talk about the management strategy. I mean, it'd be really interesting to hear that, like the management strategies that you guys are carrying out. I bet it must be a real joy to sort of have all that data there, so why you're doing what you're doing, and you're not, it's not just a finger in the air, we feel this is the right thing to do. You've got for the areas that have been surveyed, you've got the data, and therefore when you are doing human intervention, it's for a reason.
Yeah, so it's an informed, so we know what's there and what we're trying to get to.
Yeah,
it's definitely, because otherwise you could just do a bit of a finger in the air, and sometimes that does work, because you just intuitively, like being on the land all the time and walking around, you just see things, and you kind of realize, see what's going on. But having the scientific data there as well is a big help.
And I guess that so you're sort of been there for a year, but how do you find the collaboration, the communication between yourselves on the ground and then the other consultants that have come in? Because again, that must be a really nice sort of collaboration, because again, you guys are on site all the time. You're seeing sort of, it's not anecdotal, well, it kind of is anecdotal. You're seeing the stuff on the ground and you're telling them, and then there's this sort of toing and froing of information.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite it works really well. Like a lot of the time, like we'll just be involved sometimes with, if it's like really specialist work, we're just sort of logistics and sort of showing people around and telling them where the best place to go would be to do that. But then they're also sharing their information with us, and it's really good, because we've got some really sort of cutting edge research going on there, like and we feel really privileged to be sort of privy to all that, because it just gives you such a good insight of underneath the anecdotal stuff. There's like this the I don't know the numbers and the sort of science of it all. It's really interesting.
And then on a sort of I mean, how is that going to work sort of going forward? I mean, how is it going to work going forward? How does it work on a kind of a day-to-day basis? Are you in contact with consultants sort of most days, and there is this ongoing, or is it more sporadic? I know that's a very nuts and bolts question, but I'm really conscious to find out, because I love the idea of the idea of the collaboration, the science, the anecdotal, and really informing people's decision making.
I mean, it can be sporadic. Something like the summertime's definitely a lot busier. We have a lot more research going on in the summertime. I think but generally speaking, we're in contact with researchers and contractors who come out to do work for us, and they're quite happy to share. They share all their data with us, and it's all about sharing with it, so we know what we're doing. Like,
but it's one thing I see you guys are doing is that you're doing the work, you're getting the data, you're recording the data, because that's going to inform, give you the justification that when you can say to other adjacent landowners, other landowners in the Highlands of Scotland, that this type of land management works. It pays for itself, and perhaps if we come full circle and investable, so people can invest into it, and I really see that as perhaps that's the kind of the next step, really, that you're doing the work, you're getting the data, and then correct me if I'm wrong, you obviously the area better than I do, that the old style of land management in the Highlands is no longer the best financial option.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of what we're trying to do, to lead by example and show that another way is possible of managing the land. And I forget the name of the place, but there's a very small croft nearby us, and the guy who's running it there is running a similar sort of way, a sort of small rewilding thing, and education and whatnot. And he's employing 15 people. The neighboring estate, which is thousands of hectares, employs 2 people.
Wow.
So, and even at Bunloit, I forget, we have maybe 20 people employed there. Previously, when it was managed the old way, there was maybe 2 people employed there, sort of seasonally. So already is shown that it's providing lots of local jobs.
Yeah.
And we're looking to maybe provide more as well. And I think that's, if we can get it to really work, then I think it would just be silly for them not to follow suit, because I think the old ways of running the land, grouse shooting and deer and sort of sheep farming, a lot of sheep, it just won't appear, it's just not profitable anymore, and people they'll just fall in line. And I think maybe they'll see that there's better ways to do things.
Well, this is the point that comes up that's always come up in quite a few of the old podcasts. We have these conversations about why people are doing what, but it comes down to financial incentives. People are doing whatever it may be, whether it may be farming, whether it may be water management, whatever. They do it because they're incentivized to do it. So
it's kind of a shame. Like, you'd kind of want people to do it because it's the right thing to do, but you need a bit of a carrot as well, I think.
Don't get me wrong. Unfortunately, it takes people to do the right thing, to in the first instance to start the process. But again, if you think about that's, thank you for saying that about about the number of employees, because if you look at, you only have to see from afar what NEP are doing and how it's growing in terms of local employment. I could rattle off 5 other examples of how it's growing, but that's really interesting that even at this early point, the numbers of employees are going up, and that's quite interesting, because I don't know the area, but I guess as we sit here now, the Highlands of Scotland are very unpopulated, and I guess a lot of populations in Scotland are more so than the southeast in the cities, and it must be very, very rural.
Yeah, definitely, and sort of rural employment's a big issue here. Like, it's a lot of people leave rural areas because they can't find work.
Yeah.
As if a lot of these big estates in the Highlands, which own, which on which a lot of these little villages sit next to or in, then people wouldn't need to leave because these estates could provide like lots of varied types of employment. Like we're currently advertising for a financial advisor on the about Bun Lloyd, so that's like, it's not a land-based job, but it's like, so it's a job for someone that does financial stuff rather than, you know, working. So you're all sorts of different jobs within the estate.
So that's interesting. So again, excuse my ignorance, but in terms of how sort of the Highlands, rural Scotland, is it a lot of large estates sort of butting up against each other? Is that how it is, or is it more piecemeal? Because I mean, again, I'm comparing, I'm trying to draw distinctions between, perhaps, I don't know, the south of England where we are with you guys. Do you find that, is it lots of, you know, large estate owners just managing it like that?
Yeah, there are a lot of large estate owners, especially like the hill ground, like more like that's mostly under big estates, where you get closer down to like sort of villages and closer to the coast, and that it's broken up into sort of smaller farms because it's more productive land. But sort of, the hill ground and sort of further north and west you get, it's all really big estates.
Interesting you use the phrase productive land, but it's trying to but no, I kind of like that.
I mean, it's like if you happen the hill ground, like, I mean, I grew a lot of stuff here, and I used to live at Bun Lloyd, and it's quite high. It's over 300 meters at Bun Lloyd, and I used to grow a lot of stuff there. And compared to where I live now, it's a lot easier to grow stuff here. So yeah, that's sort of what I was meaning. Just sort of up on the hill ground, the soil is really thin, it's really acid, it's really exposed. So yeah, in terms of growing, that's what I was meaning, productive.
So, but we were chatting the other day about you know, the again, the forest garden, and how that might be linking into what you guys are doing at Bun Lloyd. Yeah,
well, I mean, that's another sort of avenue of employment or local food production and money generation, and it's kind of my thing. That's what I'm into. Well, I can't really see the forest garden here from where I'm sitting, but it sort of stretches away over there. I have like a sort of 1.5 acres planted here, and I'm trying to do the same at Bun Lloyd, or we're trying to do the same at Bun Lloyd. We started planting last autumn with a school group. Just getting them involved in it, and and hopefully we'll keep doing that and expanding maybe to about a couple of acres. Obviously growing like your usual things, what you can grow here, like apples and plums, pears, but then also some more unusual stuff as well, because you can maybe sell them for a premium. Like I'm growing a lot of Szechuan pepper here, kiwis, and sort of I'm experimenting with a lot of stuff. I don't know if it will work, like, but just to show that you can, from a very small bit of land, the forest gardening is quite a productive way of producing food from a very small area, because you're using all the different layers of a forest to be productive. Like from a square meter of land, and you're getting all those different layers of production. It'd be good to showcase that, I think, at Bun Lloyd, and I feel it'd be a much more productive use of 2 acres of land than having a few sheep on it.
Yeah, but again, it's interesting that again, it's you know, it's definitely reimagining, or having the courage to think about how we can use, you know, how we can begin to use land in a different way. You know, again, it does take the outliers to prove or disprove that you can do it. And I think, you know, like you say, things may work, things may not work. Well, things won't work and things will work, but it's having that courage, you know, in the short term to do it. So so we sit here now in 2022. So what is the you know, what is the plan sort of going forward? So 2023 going into 2025, where is the sort of short term, medium term direction of Highlands Rewilding?
Well, we sort of carry on what we're doing at the moment, carry on collecting data on what we have and using that to inform our management decisions, hopefully boosting biodiversity and carbon capture. Then I guess sort of further into the future, we maybe more like possibly get more estates and sort of try and run them on the same model as Bunloit is sort of building up the model that we would base future manage like the future estates on if we were to, or also to act as advisors to other estates. We could go out and advise on after we've sort of spent maybe 5 years or so working out what's going on where we are and how to do that, how to measure it all, because I feel it's only going to become more popular with the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. The people there will be money in that. Unfortunately, that's what people need to do it, but there'll be money in like carbon capture and hopefully biodiversity credits. They're not quite here yet, but I think that's almost inevitable that'll happen.
So but you mentioned in your last answer about, so you got Bun Lloyd, but the another estate that you've got at the moment is very different from Bun Lloyd Beldorney.
Yes,
very different. So could you draw sort of a comparison between the two and what Beldorney kind of looks like at the moment?
Beldorney, traditionally, like the whole area there is sheep farming and commercial forestry plantation. So you go there and it was like last year just massively overgrazed with sheep, and then Sitka spruce plantations dotted around. There's a tiny little bit of native woodland along the river, and that's it. So it's kind of a blank canvas for rewilding, really. So and yeah, it's.
I guess that was a conscious decision, though. You had to sort of you had to have the blank canvas to test the logic.
Yeah, definitely. It's an ideal place to be doing rewilding to see like what you can bring back from a relatively sterile environment. There's really, I mean, there is some interesting stuff there, but it could be a lot more, I think, definitely, and to show that surrounding landowners that what can happen, and we're going to be planting a woodland we've named the Forest of Hope, and it's kind of a riparian woodland. It's about 100,000 trees there, and along the River Devon. And there's going to be, we've also adjacent landowners sort of have come on board with us as well, and so they're going to continue the riparian corridor, like planting trees further along on their bits of land as well. So
I want can we stick on that, because you know, how much personally have you seen like adjacent landowners literally coming over to talk to you to say, what are you doing? Is there genuine interest, or is there genuine skepticism, like, you know, we're not changing, we've done this, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've not personally been involved in too much of that, but I was at a sort of meeting, a gathering of interested locals in around Beldorney, and they almost down to a man, they were all in favor of what we were doing there.
Interesting.
And they were all really keen and interested in what we were doing. it's partly due to like the area is kind of deprived in the way, although it's rural, it's massively depopulated. Like a lot of, I think they lost a lot of people to the Second World War, and then they never really recovered from that.
Yeah.
And so it's quite massively depopulated, and so they're all really keen to have something sort of new and exciting happening there.
And are they? And can you remember? It's new and exciting, as in that they are looking at it from a pragmatic, which, you know, we need employment opportunities, or are they? Is it more, or is it in conjunction with, you know, we're worried about the biodiversity crisis, we're worried about this, and this is a way to reverse it? Or is it more pragmatic and, you know, we just need employment?
It's definitely both. Like, there's a very, very limited employment opportunities in that area, but there was definitely voices saying that, yeah, we need to do something about the climate crisis and biodiversity, and also just to demonstrate that, yeah, there are other ways of running the land that could employ more people and fix the climate and biodiversity crisis all in the same time. So it's, yeah, people were definitely very positive about what we were doing there.
Yeah, and I think that's the real joy, isn't it? Because I think that, like I say, once you've got 5, 6, 7 years of data, you can prove it, and you can take all these numbers and get investment and show people the numbers. No, I think it's, you know, it's obvious. It's, well, I'm saying I'm biased, but obviously I think it's obvious it's going to work. It's worked elsewhere, so I think it's just obviously a matter of time before it just becomes totally mainstream, and we'll look back in hopefully 10, 15 years and think, why did we ever do that? Or why did we?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other ways of doing things, that often, you know, you're putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yep.
Like sheep farming or grouse shooting. So should something happen, like I don't know, a disease in sheep, whatever, then that's it. You're in real trouble. But if you've got the estate and you're running lots of different little enterprises or different ways of different income, like, you're much more resilient and again employing more people, and it's a more sensible way to do it. You're a lot less exposed to risk.
Yeah. So Daniel, thank you very much for doing the podcast.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, really loved it, actually. It's nice to hear, you know, again, like I say, I've been, you know, watching you guys from afar, but, you know, hearing about what's happening on the ground, you know, anecdotally, you know, how, well, compared to NEP, there's a lot of early skepticism, but it feels like very much people are on board from, you know, minute one, day one, which bodes really well. Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. That's really kind.
No, you're welcome.
Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Yeah, no problem.
Thanks a lot.